Okay, so picture this. An empire that just blazes onto the map, pretty much forges the Europe we know, and then, just like that, it's gone. That's the incredible, and kind of wild, story of the Carolingian Empire we're digging into today.
And that's really the big question, isn't it? How can something so massive, so influential, just crumble in a couple of generations? It's a fascinating puzzle. So let's jump in and find out, starting right at the beginning.
So our story doesn't actually begin with a king on a throne. Nope, it begins with the guys who are really pulling the strings from behind the scenes, the true power behind the crown.
Back in the 8th century, the Frankish kingdom was technically led by the Merovingian kings. But led is a strong word. They were basically just figureheads. The real power, the guys commanding the armies, making the actual decisions, they were known as the mayors of the palace. So you had this completely unstable setup. One guy with the title and another with all the real power. Something had to give.
And that delicate balance was about to be absolutely shattered by one super ambitious and very capable mayor, a man named Charles Martel. And his name, by the way, literally means Charles the Hammer.
And yeah, in the year 732, he earned that nickname, big time. At the Battle of Tours, Martel's army stopped an invading force from the Umayyad Caliphate, halting their push into Western Europe. This wasn't just any military victory, it turned him into a legend, the undisputed defender of Christendom, and for all intents and purposes, the most powerful man in the kingdom.
With his dad's legendary status paving the way, his son, Pippin the Short, decided it was time to make the power official. He kicked out the last Merovingian king, but here's the genius move. He got the Pope's official blessing to do it. That gave him the divine stamp of approval he needed. And just like that, in 751, the Carolingian dynasty was officially born. Finally, the guy with the power also had the title.
But it was Pippin's son who would take this new dynasty and forge it into an empire that would echo through all of history. We're talking about the age of Charlemagne.
Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, was an absolute force of nature. He ruled for nearly half a century in this whirlwind of conquest and brilliant organization. But his defining moment? Christmas Day, the year 800. Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans. I mean, you got to think about how huge that was. It was a direct challenge to the emperor in the East, a bold statement that a new Roman Christian empire was reborn in the West, and it was led by a Frank.
But Charlemagne was more than just a conqueror. He knew that a great empire didn't just need soldiers, it needed scholars, it needed art, it needed a shared culture. And this ambition sparked what we now call the Carolingian Renaissance.
This was a massive effort to just level up society. Charlemagne started a whole network of schools to boost literacy. He standardized Latin to unify communication across his huge territories, and he poured money into art and incredible illuminated manuscripts. His court at Aachen became the intellectual capital of Europe, a genuine beacon of learning in an era many people call the Dark Ages.
But here's the problem. This entire empire was built around the sheer force of one man's will. And when that one man was gone, well, the cracks started to show almost immediately.
After Charlemagne's death in 814, his massive empire was just too big and too diverse to hold together. It was his vision. Without his singular authority, his heirs started fighting among themselves for control. And at the same time, you've got external threats like Viking raids chipping away at the borders. The whole thing started to crumble.
The final breaking point came in 843 with something called the Treaty of Verdun. Charlemagne's 3 grandsons sat down and officially carved up the empire. And this treaty, it basically drew the first rough draft of the map of modern Europe. West Francia would eventually become France. East Francia would become Germany. And that contested strip of land right down the middle, Middle Francia, that would be fought over for the next 1,000 years.
And just like that, the fracture was complete. What was once this unified whole under Charlemagne was now permanently split into 3. The dream of a single new Roman Empire in the West was over, and the stage was set for centuries of conflict along these brand new borders.
So what happens next? Well, the collapse of this huge empire created a power vacuum, and what rushed in to fill it would completely define the political landscape of the Middle Ages. See, with no strong emperor at the top, power didn't just disappear, it flowed downwards. This is where the system we call feudalism really takes root. Local lords, counts, and dukes, they became the new centers of power. The grand, unified empire shattered into this complex and often feuding patchwork of smaller territories.
Which leaves us with this final, really fascinating paradox. The Carolingian dream of a unified empire, it failed, utterly, but in its very failure, it accidentally laid the foundations for the nations that define Europe today, France, Germany, and the lands between them. So you have to ask, did the fall of this empire actually build the modern continent? It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the end of one big story is just the beginning of many, many others.